Thank you. All right. So, what'd you come up with, Jack? What'd y'all get?
Well, it's a phrase or a saying that has filled with wisdom.
All right. So he mentioned two things. It's a phrase. So I'm going to say it's short. You know, a proverb is generally short. And he says it's full of wisdom. So it's a proverb is a short, wise saying. Short, wise saying. And it expresses a general moral truth. Now, we're going to talk about that just a little bit more in a minute. But the Proverbs in the Bible seem to be designed to assist those they were written to originally, and then by extension us, on how to live well in a manner that would please God. So when we look at the Proverbs, we see that they, the first set anyway, about the first half of the book, had a specific audience, and we'll talk about that more in a minute too. But the Proverbs probably represented the collective wisdom that had come down by word of mouth through the Jewish culture. And Solomon and others collected these into a form that could be passed on. And Solomon intended for the first set of them to be taken in by whom? Who was he talking to? His son. His son. So he was passing on from generation to generation these wise sayings that had become part of the Hebrew culture. Now, we don't want to downplay the fact that God had a hand in that. The Hebrew culture was built on God's revelation, the Mosaic law. So certainly the fact that the Jews were worshipers of God played into this, and you can see it by what's contained there. The principles contained in these proverbs are on a much higher moral plane than contemporary culture you would find in any other civilization of that time. All right, so proverbs are advice, and we're going to see that in a minute again too. But what about, and here I want to tread carefully because I don't want to give you the wrong impression about what I think about God's word, but a proverb is a general truth. It's advice to, in the case of the first few chapters, to Solomon's son. Are they hard, fast truths that are going to be true under any circumstances? Tim, what about that?
Well, I suppose you could argue that nothing is absolute about it in the context of a proverb.
Okay. Can anybody think of an example of a proverb where you would have to say, well, you know, that's good advice.
Train up a child in the way he should go, and he'll not depart.
There you go. That's the one that jumps to mind right off the bat. Great advice. Generally true. True every single time? No. We all know families of multiple kids where they were all raised the same way, with the same instruction, with the same attitudes, and if there's three of them, two of them are fine, one maybe not. And so it's difficult to attribute that to what went on in the home, because every person has free will, you know, and some children take that and some don't. So that's an example of a proverb that not always true.
But there's more of a likelihood that if they do leave, that they'll come back
Likelihood being the key word there. Yeah, I agree with that. All right, look at chapter 10, verse 27. Chapter 10, verse 27. Wes, you got a good strong voice. Can you read that for us? Oh, never mind. You're busy. Who's got it? All right, read it again, Tim.
The fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short.
All right. Generally true? Yes. A good advice about living your life? Absolutely. True all the time? No. No, we all know people who are just faithful as they can be, whose lives are cut short. And then we look around and we see all kinds of people who are not living very well, live to be 100 years old. So not a hard, fast truth. So what does that mean for how we use Proverbs?
My dictionary said it's a common truth,
A common truth,
but that doesn't mean that it's always.
not always true, but as far as we're concerned, when we look at them and it says something, what should the application be to us? Just like it is we should treat it like it's a hard and fast truth. We want to live in accord with God in a godly manner, and then if that does result in an extended life, great. And when we get over into the spiritual realm, then we know that it's absolutely true that living a godly life is going to result in really good things. All right, any other comments on what a proverb is and what it's not?
Is there any merit to raising that Solomon asked God for wisdom, and that ties in to Solomon
All right.
being an author?
Hold that thought for about 30 seconds. All right.
If it's good moral advice, we should always take it.
That's correct. That's as good a summation. If it's good moral advice, we should take it and use it. So we don't want to approach the book of Proverbs with skepticism and be, well, that's not always true. That's not what I'm suggesting. We ought to approach it as being, these are words of a man who was granted wisdom from God to reveal things that will be good for us and help us to live in a way that God wants us to.
And if God didn't want us to look at it and take the wise sayings, he wouldn't put it in the book.
All right.
And there are some that almost contradict each other. So they are obviously situational.
Okay, that's a word that we shy away from sometimes because it's,
I'll read you two.
all right.
Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes.
All right,
Those
so-
lie against each other.
Those two obviously say the exact opposite, so it's situational, as Debbie was saying. And so you've got to apply the one that fits that situation is the one you'd have to use. All right, any other comments? All right, we've already tipped off this, obviously. Who wrote Proverbs? All right, Solomon is the one that comes to mind right off the bat.
But the last two chapters, one says Agur and the other
Agur.
says Lemuel, the words, and I don't know if Solomon was repeating what he had learned from these two.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Doesn't seem to indicate that, but the majority of the book is attributed to Solomon. In 3 different places, it tells us that these are the Proverbs or the oracles of Solomon. And so right now to Daryl's point a minute ago, Solomon to me is one of the saddest characters in the Bible. It's just, this is just me. I hope that he wrote Ecclesiastes very late in his life, and he's kind of come around. back to his roots. Don't know that, but that's my hope, is he finally figured out what had happened to him, and he sort of straightened it out. But let's look at a couple of passages right quick. 1 Kings 3, starting in verse 3. Well, I don't have my Bible. 1 Kings 3, just give me just a minute while I get my act together here. Walked out without my Bible this morning. 1 Kings 3, starting in verse 3. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the instructions given him by his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Now, can you imagine that? The Lord coming to you in a dream and saying, "You just ask for what you want, and I'm going to give it to you." Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among your people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never be anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings." Wow. What a start to his reign. And he could have been unparalleled among the kings of Israel and just about anybody else if he had stuck to his initial situation there. But flip over to the next chapter, chapter 4. Verse 29, it said, God gave Solomon wisdom and a very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand of the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone. Now, I'm going to do what Wes should have done the other day when he was assigned to read a verse full of names. He was wiser than a bunch of people. And then in verse 32, he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. And he spoke about all these different things. He was a smart, wise guy. But what happened to him? Yeah.
Followed idols and
All went to his head, didn't it? All went to his head. He let all of this seemingly get personalized for him, and he forgot where it came from. And so he started marrying wives from everywhere and taking concubines, and they turned his heart against the Lord. He became a facilitator of the worship of idols. It was a sad situation. And so we look back at Solomon and see all the potential that was there for him and all the good that he did, but seemingly not a good result. All right?
the 1 Kings chapter 3,
if you follow my instructions.
By obeying my rules and regulations, like
Yep.
your father David did.
Yeah, should have read one more verse.
And then in chapter 11, it says the Lord was angry
Yep.
with Solomon.
Yep. Yep. All right. Chapter 30 is attributed to Agur, son of Jekah. Who's that? I do want to, before we leave Solomon, note one more thing. Look at chapter 25, verse 1. Chapter 25, verse 1. Says, these are more Proverbs of Solomon compiled by the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah. The very fact that the first 29 chapters are attributed to Solomon in 3 different places indicates that we've probably got 3 different collections of the Proverbs that Solomon wrote. And starting in this chapter, chapter 23 or 25, it specifies that these were collected by servants of Hezekiah. Now, somebody take a guess about how long Hezekiah lived after Solomon. Take a guess. Pretty close. Between 250, 300, about 250 years. So 250 years later, these scribes in service of King Hezekiah, who was a great king, right? And he did all kinds of good stuff. And one of the things he did, evidently, was instruct his scribes to collect all these proverbs that Solomon had written and get them in one place. Now, actually, that happened with a lot of the Old Testament, right? It would be passed down from generation to generation, and then scribes would gather it and put it into written form. So it's pretty clear that these were collections of his proverbs, perhaps put together at different times, but specifically in the days of Hezekiah. All right, back to Agur. Who is Agur?
He was a wise man, but we don't know much about him.
We don't know anything about him, right? He wrote some proverbs who got tacked on to the end of Solomon's proverbs. And then King Lemuel. Dan King's not allowed to speak now because I know what his theory on Lemuel is. I'll go ahead, Dan. Who do you think Lemuel is?
I'm sorry, Tom, I completely missed that. Athena was.
Who do you think Lemuel is?
Who do I think he is?
Uh-huh.
You know what, I do not know right now. I'm sorry.
Well, you made some comments earlier in one of the earlier classes where I thought you had a definitive opinion on that.
Yeah, I'm just a little out of sorts.
All right, never mind. Some people think it's another name for Solomon, right? I don't know where that comes from, why that should be. I mean, Solomon is recognized by name in 3 places, and another guy, Agur, is recognized. So most, as in nearly all, people who comment on this kind of thing think that he's a non-Jewish Israelite king. And we don't know who he is. But he remembered things that his mother had told him, right? So the actual author of that last chapter is Lemuel's mother, and he put those together, and then they found their way into the collection of the Proverbs of Solomon. All right, any other pertinent comments about who wrote Proverbs? All right, what are some major themes in Proverbs? All right, a couple of minutes, talk amongst yourselves, get 3 or 4 major themes in the book of Proverbs. right, the chatter seems to have died down, so. Kerry, what you got? What's a major theme?
Well, one theme is to listen carefully, accept instruction.
All right, listen to instruction, pay attention to what you're told, specifically in the first part of the book by your father. Right? All right?
Directions of what wisdom looks like and what foolishness looks like.
All right, wisdom and folly, one of the big themes, a contrast between wisdom. I'm going to go ahead and throw mine up there. That's number 2 on my list. Wisdom and folly seem to be woven in and out. All right, who had another one? Pardon? All right, friendship, relationships, the family relationships, who you hang out with, all kinds of advice about relationships, the good and the bad, the bad effect it can have on you, the good effect it can have on you. All right, my other ones were fear of the Lord. We're going to come back to that one towards the end of the class. Justice and fairness, humility versus pride. All right, who's got one that's not on the list here?
Hard work and laziness.
Okay, hard work, industriousness. Whew, easy for you to say. Hard work and laziness. All right, what else?
Integrity and self-control.
All right, got the tongue. The tongue. Again, good, bad. Let's go over here.
Integrity.
Integrity.
God's definition of wisdom versus the
All right.
world's definition.
I'm going to get closer.
God's definition of wisdom versus the world's definition of
All right, so a little bit different twist on wisdom. God's definition of wisdom versus the world's definition of wisdom. Tim?
Overall, God for living under his sun.
All right, and that's the big theme. And the big takeaway is it's trying to tell, or the Solomon and the other writers and the Lord through them is trying to instruct us on how to live in a godly manner on this earth. There are all kinds of influences, and we see in our list of some of the subjects things that can impact us and pull us away from the way God wants us to live. And this is all advice and instruction on how to resist that and stay in the paths that God would have us to walk.
There's a lot of principle of discipline.
Discipline.
And applied in many situational.
All right. Daryl used the word apply, and so that's something I think we ought to talk about because we've thrown out the word wisdom several times, and wisdom implies the application of something. Knowledge is one thing. You can know a whole lot of stuff and not be very wise. When you bring wisdom in to connect to knowledge, that's showing us that you are using that knowledge in a constructive manner. So you've applied it to your life. So a lot of the Proverbs are about what it looks like when you've taken wisdom and put it into your life, and it's guiding your behavior in all these aspects of life.
That comes specifically in the first few chapters when he's seemingly talking to his son. So you could technically see that this is a personal relationship that he is providing this knowledge to, and then following up with specific examples of not following men into bloodshed and not following temptation for adultery or going towards harlots. So you see that very specifically in the discipline of understanding and applying wisdom.
All right, good thoughts. All right, the answer, one answer you could have given for the major themes of Proverbs is that it's just about anything having to do with living under the sun, as Tim said. You name almost any subject, and there's going to be something about that in the book of Proverbs. So I made a little list, and some of these will be things we've already mentioned, but family and marriage, lots of advice about that. The work, friendship, wealth, poverty, and debt. There's instructions about debt. The abusive use of alcohol, our speech, justice and fairness. All of these are themes that we find scattered throughout Proverbs.
It's basically trying to tell us the difference between godly wisdom and what humans consider to be wisdom.
All right, we'll surface that again. The difference between godly wisdom and worldly wisdom. One of the compilations of the Bible that I use to read on a yearly reading plan quite often is called the Chronological Bible. F. LaGard Smith, is that his name? Yeah. Did this, and it's really interesting. A lot of people don't like it because it takes God's word and rearranges it in chronological order. But it groups the Psalms and it groups the Proverbs together by subject matter. So, when you're reading Proverbs, it's bang, 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 bang. And he takes them and groups them by subject matter. And it's kind of interesting because it puts everything that Proverbs has to say about a certain subject in the same place. So if you'd ever like to see that done, that's F. LaGard Smith's Chronological Bible. And you can't really use it for day-to-day. You can use it for reading. It's difficult to use for day-to-day study because you can't find things sometimes because they're not where they belong. All right, any other comments on major themes? All right, one of the validations of any Old Testament book, although not necessary to the validation of that book, is the question, do we find references or quotes to this book in the New Testament? All right, what do you think about Proverbs, yes or no?
Don, I was actually really excited that you brought that up in your sheet because there's two specific that jump out to me.
All right.
And the first one is
Hold just a minute. I'll come right back to you. Let's finish a thought about, is it necessary for an Old Testament book to be alluded to or quoted in the New Testament for it to be valid? No, that's not part of the credentials of an Old Testament book. There are 9 that are not, according to the Google and AI. Take a guess. Bob, what Old Testament book would you guess is not alluded to or quoted? You got one? You don't have one. Jack, you got one? Just take a guess. There's one obvious one. What's the only Old Testament book that does not mention God? Esther. Also not referenced or quoted in the New Testament. Any other guesses? All right. Judges. Ruth. That one kind of surprised me. But when I got to thinking about it, she's mentioned in the list of the chronology of Jesus, but the book not. Ezra, Ecclesiastes, not surprisingly, the Song of Solomon, Lamentations, Obadiah, Jonah, and Zephaniah. Go ahead.
Well, as I say, I was looking up this while you're talking. There's one from Ecclesiastes according to this, Romans 3:10. Indeed, the righteous man lives and continually does good and never sins, and that's Ecclesiastes 7:20.
Okay, so Tim found is that a quote or an allusion? Is that a direct quote? A quote? Okay. So Tim thinks there is one from Ecclesiastes, which I was a little surprised myself when that one popped up. Any other? All right. So the answer, though, to the question about Proverbs is it quoted in the New Testament? The answer is yes. There you go.
And I wouldn't necessarily say it's quoted, but
Or alluded to.
alluded to
Yeah.
potentially. I mean, when Jesus is giving his teachings, what pops out to me is Proverbs 25:6. Do not exalt yourself in the presence of a king, and do not stand in the place of the great, for it is better that he say to you, come up here, than that you should be put lower in the presence of the prince whom your eyes have seen.
All right? We all know, don't take the chief seat at the table. Take the low seat, and then you'll be honored when you're brought up to the head seat.
Hebrews 12, 5 and 6, it's from Proverbs 3, 11 and 12, where it talks about, do not scorn the Lord's discipline or give up when he corrects you, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son he accepts.
All right, that's the first one on my list. This is a direct quote, and you probably couldn't hear Marcia, so I'll read it again. Proverbs 3, 11 and 12 says, my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof, for the Lord reproves him whom he loves as a father the son in whom he delights. And the Hebrew writer says, have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? He's saying, have you forgotten what the book of Proverbs says about this? He's talking about discipline from the Lord being a good thing. And it's a direct quote. Now, why, when there's a direct quote in the New Testament from something in the Old Testament, do they not always read the same?
The Septuagint was used in the New Testament.
You got to remember that you're going different routes. So the New Testament writers and Jesus himself was quoting from the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint. Our translations skip that and go back all the way to the Hebrew manuscripts and directly translate it into more, in most cases, more modern English. So even though the thought's always going to be the same, the wording is not exactly the same. So the Hebrew writer says, my son, quotes this, my son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. So our translations don't repeat it word for word, but it's obvious, a direct quote from the book of Proverbs.
New findings are incorporated into newer translations.
Yeah. Old manuscripts that have been found since the King James or the Septuagint in the case of what they were using back then. All right. Another one that's pretty much a direct quote is James 4:6, where James says, but he gives grace, more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. That's a quote of Proverbs 3:34, towards the scorners he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. Now, here's one that was interesting to me. Romans 12:20 says, to the contrary about how to treat people. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Now, if you had just asked me, walked up this time last week before I got too deep into this and said, here's Romans 12:20. Is that a New Testament principle or an Old Testament principle? I would have said, well, man, that's New Testament stuff. Well, here's what Proverbs 25:21-22 says. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. A direct quote by Paul in Romans from Proverbs. So that one kind of surprised me. All right, did Jesus ever quote or allude to the Proverbs? Couldn't find a direct quote, but this allusion it's a solid allusion. In Matthew 16:27, for the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of the Lord, and he will repay each person according to what he's done. And in Proverbs it says, who weighs the heart to perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not repay man according to his work? So that statement that Jesus made about he will repay each person according to what he has done is at least an allusion, I think, to that verse in Proverbs where it says, he meant he will repay man according to their work.
Allusion to Psalms 28 and verse 4.
All right, read that for us.
It says, give them according to their deeds, and according to the wickedness of their endeavors, give them after the work of their hands, render to them their desert.
Okay, same idea. Anybody got any others right off the top of your head?
I've got something that would be considered a bit of a stretch here.
All right, go for it.
Just quite a bit of a stretch, but it kind of gives me the reminder of when Jesus was saying, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Proverbs 23 says, when you sit down and eat with a ruler, consider carefully what is before you and put a knife to your throat if you are a man given to appetite.
Huh, yeah, similar. All right, similar.
Pretty extreme thoughts in
Yeah,
terms of just
yeah.
something that seemingly
Cut your hand off or cut your own throat. All right, any others?
Proverbs 6:20 said, "My son, keep your father's command and do not forsake the law of your mother." And then Ephesians 6:1, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is
All right.
about obeying."
Okay. The parent-child relationship and children are supposed to obey their parents. Anybody else got any others? Carrie?
Peter quotes in 1 Peter chapter 4, love will cover a multitude of sins, and it's all the same verbiage in Proverbs 10:12. Love covers all offenses.
Yeah, I had that one in my list, and I cut it for some reason. Something bothered me about that one, and it is definitely an illusion, but I can't remember what. I finally dropped that one, but I had it in my initial list. Any others?
I read something said that there's probably between 30 and 35
Illusions.
from
Yeah. Yeah. Heavily quoted, some alluded to often. All right. So what use can we make of the book of Proverbs in our lives today? And I would just direct us back to the opening of the book. And I'm going to read the first 7 verses where Solomon was actually giving the purpose of the book. Thank you. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and the riddles, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So I think that's what we can take from Proverbs. All right, thanks for your participation. I hope it's been a good study of Proverbs for you. Next week, Christian attitudes.